Tonight, we will head to Rikers Island, where soon teens will no longer be placed in solitary confinement. And tonight, we hear from a defense attorney who's representing a young man who's locked up at Rikers for 3 years for a crime he was never even convicted of. And new details emerge about the latest security breach at the White House. Federal authorities say an Iraq war vet made it further into the building than we were originally led to believe. Today, the director of the Secret Service was in the hot seat answering tough questions fired off by members of Congress. Plus, there are calls for Governor Cuomo to take a trip, not to Afghanistan again, but to Pennsylvania to get a first-hand look at hydrofracking sites. Whether or not the governor will go, we went, and we'll show you what we found. And we'll also ask if the governor will ever take a position on the issue. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to begin with the latest set of bad headlines for Rikers Island, the overcrowded, understaffed jail hub for all of New York City. A judge urging that 6 Rikers guards, including a captain, be fired. That for the beating of a then 25-year-old inmate. That judge calling it brazen misconduct in the case of Robert Hinton. Now here's what Hinton looked like after the incident. Judge determined the guards hog-tied Hinton, cuffed his hands behind his back, shackled his legs, then carried him into a solitary confinement cell. 10 minutes later, Hinton had a broken nose, eyes swollen shut, bleeding from the mouth, and had a broken vertebrae. The judge said that she hopes her call for the firings will help break the vice, her words, of a silence and collusion at Rikers. Now this came just days after the Correction Association announced an end to solitary confinement for 16 and 17-year-old inmates. That rule is expected to go into effect by the end of the year, a decision which itself came after reports of the brutality against teen inmates at the facility. A federal report released by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan back in August cited a deep-seated culture of violence against teen inmates and found the violence to be excessive and inappropriate. Today, word of yet another Rikers horror story. The New Yorker telling the story of Kalief Browder, a 17-year-old and then 17-year-old accused of stealing a backpack, charges that were later dropped. But Browder spent, get this, 3 years at Rikers without even seeing a courtroom, never going to trial. That's thanks to a series of delays inside the prosecutor's office and in the Bronx criminal court system. He also claims he was subjected to months of solitary, beatings and fights with jail officers, and gang violence at Rikers. We're very pleased to be joined by Mr. Browder's attorney, Paul Prestia. He began his career in the Kings County DA's office and currently focuses on criminal defense and civil rights cases, and he's kind enough to join us as we speak. Thank you very much.
Great to see you, Richard. Gentlemen.
We gave a background to the case here, but I thought the Sixth Amendment said if any of us here get in trouble, whether guilty or innocent, we have a right to a fair and a speedy trial. How does somebody sit for 3 years at Rikers before they can even get in front of a court and get to have their case heard?
The criminal justice system failed Kalief Browder in this case, from the arrest process, from the way the malicious prosecution, in my opinion, by the Bronx District Attorney's Office, and obviously what he went through at Rikers Island. But in no way, shape, or form should this case have lingered for 3 years.
He goes in. Now, even by all city standards, the Bronx has got one of the worst reps in terms of the backlog of cases that it has. That said, because he was on probation for something else, he could be held there indefinitely, even before he got in front of a... You yourself were skeptical when it finally came to you, you know, after his release. You're like, there's no way the guy could spend 3 years. 3 years. Explain, without, you know, making the eyes glass over our audience, how the clock works. Because you're supposed to get in front of it for 6 months, but how the days count, you almost need an abacus to figure it out.
Technically, it's 6 months on a felony. Technically. Now, there are times that clock, that figurative clock, stops for motion practice or other adjournments by the court, the defense attorney, or the district attorney's office. But in this case, it's so clear to me from reviewing the court file that the district attorney's office prolonged this case unnecessarily over and over and over again. And if you see those adjournments, especially the way they're depicted in the New Yorker magazine, requesting 1 week, it's
Requesting one day, but it's not a day. It's another 6 weeks, so you can't get on the docket.
In my opinion, they completely circumvented the speedy trial laws. This is something that happens in every courtroom in this city every day, where the district attorney's office states they're not ready today, but they can be ready in a week. And yet the judge will put the case over for a month. In the summer, maybe it's 2 months.
Do you think they did this intentionally to try to apply more pressure to your client to get him to either, you know, cop to what they accused him of doing, or just sign here so you can get out of jail? The longer you sit in jail, the worse he's going to want to get out?
I don't know if I'd go so far to say intentional, but I believe there was such a reckless disregard for his rights in this case that I think they were probably hopeful that that would be the case.
But Counselor,
that he would take a plea at some point.
This is personal for me. The case involving your client.
I've gotten to know Kalief very well.
But here's why. He lived in the area. I lived less than 3 blocks from where this happened. He lived at 186, or at least that's where the police initially stopped him. I lived at 184th Street, less than 3 blocks apart from where this all happened.
Right.
And you're telling me, and looking over this story here, focusing on the issue right now that Richard's focusing on one of those adjournments by the prosecutors, the prosecutor said that the assistant district attorney was on vacation while your client is in solitary confinement, suicidal, and that's a reason to stall for more time?
Oh, don't get me started now. It'd be one thing if my client or Kalief was not incarcerated. That happens all the time where they get these long adjournments. But for him to be incarcerated in solitary, attempting suicide while the DA is on vacation. There are hundreds of ADAs in the Bronx who could have stood in on this case.
Assistant district attorneys.
Correct. Who could have stood in on this case at some point if they actually were serious about being ready for trial, and they actually had a witness in this case that could have stepped in and tried this case.
As much as the system's on trial here, Rikers in a certain way is. We've seen the front page exposés the Times have done. Dominic sat down here with the head of the union for the COs over there, a pretty illuminating interview. It's not like he sat there playing Parcheesi for the last 3 years. For I think half the time, if not more, he was in solitary. Tried to kill himself on multiple occasions. He still isn't right since he's been out. He tried to kill himself. Talk about the Bing, as they call it, and just how much it really screwed your client up.
It ruined his life, to be honest with you, Richard. I don't think anything can be done to make him whole. But think about a young man at that age being confined to an 8 by 10
foot. We're talking about a teenager. You're talking about a 16-year-old who would be a junior in high school.
He was a kid. You know, they accused him of robbing this person in the Bronx. But ironically enough, the system robbed this kid of his innocence.
Now, I remember going through the story here. He was offered multiple plea deals, including one at the end that says, just plead to 2 misdemeanors and you go home today.
Right.
And he said no. Why did he say no?
He was innocent. He was innocent from the beginning. And the fact that the district attorney's office even prosecuted this case is a joke to me. There was nothing there. And the victim in this case, he told the police initially that my client tried to rob him that night. Then they went back and he stated it was 2 weeks ago, or that it was 1 week ago, as it's written up in one of the police reports. So, and the most incredible thing is, this victim did not call 911. So you really have to question the credibility of the victim in this case. And the district attorney's office should have taken a hard look at this victim before they went forward and set bail, and then forgot about Kalief Browder.
But Counselor, your client missed. He missed. You can't get this back. He missed his high school graduation completely.
Exactly.
And this is the year 2014. And you can spend 3 years in Rikers, where he claims that one of his allegations, an officer said, I want to fight you, took him out and fought him, and put him back in the cell. You can spend 3 years in Rikers without a trial? Is that possible?
When I first got the call from his relative explaining what happened to him, I thought there must have been some catch. Something wasn't right. But in fact, it was as bad as it could have been. It was worse than that. And the scary thing is, Dominic, that these corrections officers in Rikers, and I know they've changed the laws all of a sudden, and they've done a 180, long overdue, but I won't digress here with that. The fact that these officers, these corrections officers, had the authority to punish these the accused like this, these teenagers, by putting them in solitary, it's scary. It's scary.
You brought a civil suit against the city, the NYPD, Department of Corrections, the Bronx DA's office. You yourself, former prosecutor in Brooklyn right here. If you had to prioritize who let your client down the most, or who you're going to allege took the most from your client, who would it be?
It's really hard to say, Richard. I think that what he endured in Rikers affected him the most. If he wasn't incarcerated, then yeah, 3 years going back and forth to court would be one thing. And that would be egregious in and of itself. But the physical and mental abuse that he suffered while in solitary, I think that's the most egregious thing here. I mean, that is the thing that he'll never get back. Those nightmares will never go away. He's in counseling. He's gone for his GED. He's in college taking classes. You know, we had him, well, he was working part-time, and he's really trying to get inculcated back into society. And he's doing the best that he can, but he'll always live with that time that he spent in that box, always.
And we'll continue to follow how this moves along. Paul Prestia, I appreciate it. Best of luck with you and your client. Thank you very much.
Richard. Thank you.
And on a related subject, speaking of prison reform, I want you to head over to Facebook and watch our special, which previously aired on RFL, called Bail and Jail. And it talks about, what shocked me at least, how the whole process works, even for misdemeanors. If you can't make bail here in certain of these cases, you're going behind bars. And we're not talking for a day or a week, but for extended periods of time. Okay, coming up next, we will switch gears and we will head to Washington, where the director of the Secret Service, she was grilled today by a congressional panel over that security breach at the White House that has the nation stunned with some of the new revelations. Stay with us.